where would you rank Brown and Tatum in terms of NBA duos if you are starting a franchise tomorrow? And for me, they might be number one. They really, even without any bias, they might be number one. Here's why. If you are instantly chasing, like if you're looking at it like I want to win a title in the next 2 years, you're ring chasing right away, then of course you'd argue for, LeBron and Davis. You maybe would argue for Durant and Harden. But if you are thinking about your future and starting a franchise, locking up young guys, is there anyone else that you could pick?
In my opinion, no. I mean, I think you kind of broke it down there the right way, and this is how GMs have different approaches to the way they approach their teams, right? Like Toronto went for it a few years ago when they acquired Kawhi Leonard. At that point, I mean, they didn't know that they weren't going to keep Kawhi Leonard, but they were pushing all their chips in, and they were saying, if we win a championship, that's what we want. And if we struggle a little bit after that because we don't have that guy there anymore, it's worth it to win the championship. There are other teams who are not necessarily in that boat who would prefer to be sustainably competitive. The Celtics are that team right now.
Mm-hmm.
They were not willing to push in all their chips for particular players because they wanted to be sustainably great and competitive for titles. And they're in that conversation now. I do agree with you. And I don't know if I would have before this season, but the way that Jaylen is playing now, I think forces you to say yes to that, right? Like, what better young duo is there in the NBA? There isn't one, right? Like there are older duos that are better that could maybe get you a title in the next 2 to 3 years. And really, then you're talking about the conversation of the 2007 trade and putting together the big three. But you name those duos right there with Harden and Durant, and then LeBron and Anthony Davis. Maybe you throw Kawhi and Paul George in there just because of where Kawhi has been. And you got to credit Paul George. He's bounced back this season. He's having a great year so far. But if you're going young and you want to be sustainably competitive, there's no better choice than the choice in Boston. These guys are locked up. And as I just said with Jaylen Brown, Tatum's in the same boat. These guys are only going to get better. Like they are not in their prime yet. They're only in the infancy stages of their career. Jaylen Brown's maybe a third of the way through his career. Like the next 5 or 6 years are going to be his best years. Jayson Tatum's got another 3 or 4 years until he gets to that point. So they're only going to get better. The Celtics are only going to get better because of that. It's just a matter of, do they get them over the hump?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm taking Jayson and Jaylen over like LeBron and AD and Durant and Harden right now. I mean, I'm not going to do that considering what those guys have all accomplished.
It's all about your goals, right? Do you want to win now, or do you want to be competitive long term? That's you're deciding you want to win now, and that's totally justified.
I would argue that all those teams are going to be competitive for a while. With the way LeBron's body works, he's an alien, and we all need to recognize that. And he's probably going to play much like Tom Brady, like later than people would imagine for a guy with that many miles and that much attention, on both ends of the floor. Having Anthony Davis makes life a lot easier, and he's obviously you're watching the potential torch be passed from LeBron to Anthony Davis at some point in the next couple of years. And then again, Durant and Harden, I mean, those guys are two of the best individual one-on-one scorers in the history of basketball. So, I mean, if they're going to be behind those two particular guys or two sets of guys, there's no shame in that, right? The upside you have is like these guys haven't peaked yet, right? We've seen that, as much as I hate to say this because LeBron keeps surprising me every single year, we've seen the best of LeBron, okay? He's still unbelievably talented and unbelievably gifted, but, the Miami Heat days were the days where he was just on top of the world, and I've, kind of never seen anything like him. Kevin Durant and James Harden, they're in their 30s. Again, two of the most prolific scorers in the history of the game. However, those two guys, we've probably seen the best of those two guys somewhere else. Durant, I would say, in Golden State was just unbelievable, given the combination of weapons and, his efficiency was through the roof. And of course, James Harden with Houston was unbelievable and was very, very close to beating the Warriors to get to the NBA Finals. So, but in terms of Tatum and Brown, I mean, you look around the rest of the Eastern Conference, just take the East. Don't worry about the West right now because you have to worry about your teams in your own conference. you look at Milwaukee and say they're very Giannis dependent, right? And they have Middleton and Drew Holiday, and that's a nice mix. But, they're very reliant on Giannis, whose ability to shoot a jump shot hasn't changed in the past couple of years. Speaking of jump shots not changing in the past couple of years, let's go to Philadelphia and talk about how Ben Simmons, same draft class as Jaylen Brown, still can't shoot, right? Mm-hmm. So you have the two particular favorites ahead of Boston. They have obvious problems and obvious weaknesses. The one thing that you can say about the Celtics and these two guys is they address what they're bad at. And again, they're not my favorite duo in the league. And as much as I want to be a Celtics homer, they're not my favorite duo in the league in terms of like trying to win championships. However, if those two are your main guys, what you're seeing is, can they contend for a title the next 5 years? Yeah, I think they're going to be heard from in the next 5 years, right? As they continue to get better and grow with each other. What's great about these two guys, and Mark, maybe you can speak more to this, is how these two guys specifically fuel each other to be better. And that is a ginormous benefit to the Celtics in terms of like these two guys' relationship. You want a Klay Thompson and a Steph Curry type relationship where these two guys feed off each other, they make each other better, and you can see them staying together for a very, very, very long time, provided some screw ups along the way. That's the goal. It's having a Westbrook and KD before it gets dicey and before it seems to blow up and now everybody goes their separate ways. These two guys fuel each other to be better, and I would assume you've probably seen that up close better than almost anybody.
Yeah, and they're both really good guys that like each other and celebrate each other's success. And I don't think it's like an act. I think sometimes in the NBA and in other sports, there's a little bit of an act, and maybe someone's jealous actually behind closed doors when they're publicly saying that they're celebrating someone's success. These guys really do celebrate each other's success and they enjoy it. I do want to make one comment on one thing that you said, a parallel between when you were talking about LeBron in his days in Miami, when that's when he was at his best. We all remember that Game 6 in Boston. I think it was 2012, right? Mm-hmm. When LeBron discovered LeBron. It was like all of us were watching him for his entire career. And there was that one thing that needed to be unlocked to take him to that next level where he was going to win a title. And it was him understanding that he couldn't be stopped. If he just put his head down and went to the rack, he was either going to score or he was going to be fouled. There is a similar level of that here in Boston that I think is still yet to be unlocked with Tatum and Brown. I'm not saying they're LeBron. I'm just saying Jaylen Brown can get to the basket whenever he wants. Jayson Tatum, he's so shifty in the way that he gets his shots off. And you can see sometimes when he gets around the basket, he's not quite as strong with his finishes as he would like. He wants to really finish around people rather than creating the contact. I think that those guys just have that one last thing that need to be unlocked offensively, and they're going to shoot through the roof because neither of them are taking 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 free throws a game. They're hovering around 3, 4, maybe 5 on a good stretch. Mm-hmm. They need to get up toward 10, push 10, and that's going to launch them into a different stratosphere. And that, Evan, is when that duo is going to be at the forefront of the league now. Not just talking about long-term sustainability, talking about now. They're not there yet, but I think that's going to happen in the next, it could happen at some point this year. I definitely think it's going to happen at some point in the next couple of years.